Hey guys, my name is Jenny Murphy, and I have prepared a presentation on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. For those of you who don't know about it, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is sort of a guide through the afterlife between death and rebirth. The book is read aloud to the deceased and help ensure that they find a way back to a good rebirth. The untranslated title is the Bardo of Thulgral. Sometimes you may hear it called The Great Liberation Through Hearing in the Bardo, or the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. The book is a sacred text belonging to Tibetan Buddhists. The title reflects their belief that throughout your life you are traveling through the bardos, or different states of the mind. When I began my research, I found some scholars like Donald Lopez claim the Tibetan Book of the Dead was a text basically created by a Westerner, passed off as Buddhist sacred scripture. So that got me curious about whether or not the book reflected Tibetan Buddhist philosophy on life and death. So naturally, I started researching the book's origins. What I found was the original Bardo of Thulgral was written by Padmasambhava in the 7th century. Padmasambhava was either from northwest Pakistan or Afghanistan. No one really knows for sure. He was a big mystery. His real name is completely unknown, but people refer to him as Padmasambhava, which means the lotus-born. This guy was somewhat of a legend. He was known to heal the sick, prophesize the future, and even taught followers to fly. When he first arrived in Tibet, it was a military state with demons floating around, so of course Padmasambhava challenged them to magical combat. It's said that he converted the demons and left Tibet as one of the most spiritual countries. At last, he wrote the Bardo of Thulgral and hid it away in the foothills of central Tibet, leaving behind a prophecy in 600 years that in 600 years it would be found. It was found 600 years to the day by Karmalingpa in the late 14th century and was accepted into Tibetan Buddhism, whereas back in the 7th century it was regarded as dangerous. Bardo of Thulgral stayed isolated in Tibet until an American anthropologist, Walter Evans Wentz, translated it and brought it to the West. The first publication was in 1927. It was a hit success. Then, in the 1960s, Timothy Leary translated the psychedelic version for LSD trips. Since it was brought to the West, it has maintained popularity. Most of the sources I found didn't really have an issue with the English translation, and inherently, in any translation, some meaning will be lost and new meaning will be found. In the film The Tibetan Book of the Dead, Tibetan Buddhist views of death differed vastly from what we would find here in the States. There was no finality to the way they talked about it and understood it as part of life. To them, life cannot be created or destroyed, similar to how scientists view energy. The basic tenet of Buddhism is that suffering exists and is inevitable. The root causes of suffering are desire and ignorance. The way we relieve suffering is through meditation and practicing compassion. Tibetan Buddhists believe that life is a constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. When a loved one is on the brink of death, a Buddhist monk or yogi is called to recite the Bardo of Thulgral and make the appropriate offerings. The Bardo of Thulgral will be read aloud to them for 49 days, since that's the length of the time between death and rebirth. It is believed that the dead have sensitive hearing and will be able to hear the Bardo of Thulgral and prayers for them throughout their journey. The moment of death is the first Bardo. Leading up to the moment, the four elements collapse in on each other inside of the body. When they have finished collapsing, a brilliant white light that is the consciousness of all Buddhas and awakened ones will appear. This is the first Bardo state. The dead will not know they are dead and can still hear and see their family. The monk will then position the deceased onto their right side and pray for the dead to move on unafraid. They tell them not to cling on to their former lives. The monks carry on the 49 days, making offerings and prayers. If the dead is unable to recognize the lumosity of the mind itself, and then imagery begins to form, moving them into the second Bardo. The second Bardo begins with the blue light around the Buddha Vairocana, appearing before the dead. Soon after, 42 peaceful deities will appear and offer God the pleasures of the gods. If the dead is unable to let go and not indulge, then these gods become 58 wrathful gods. These gods drink the blood of the ego and crush delusions. Finally, all deities come together, both peaceful and wrathful deities, to form the Lord of Death, Yama. It is said Yama will examine the soul. Evil deeds will generate black pebbles and good deeds will earn white pebbles. Depending depending on how the individual lived their life, they will either be granted a good rebirth or a damned rebirth. A human rebirth is one of the highest rebirths the soul could have. It's also possible to be reborn as a god in another realm, but it's not necessarily better than a human birth. Gods are still responsible for maintaining balance within themselves. Being a god doesn't, in this context, mean they're in charge of a world or eternally blissful. Some less favorable rebirths include animals, hungry ghosts, and a lifetime in hell. Hungry ghosts are possibly the worst rebirth. They are reborn as a spirit with a pencil-thin neck and are unable to eat anything, so they live a lifetime of constant insatiable hunger. In the third Bardo state, the Bardo of rebirth, senses become acute and an individual is able to go anywhere in the universe. They can fly through things but cannot land. The soul becomes tired, and anger, lust, and confusion become more and more intense. During this journey, if the dead can awaken and recognize projections, they may choose their own rebirth. Others will fly around and grow more confused, lustful, and angry. For them, any birth will be satisfying. 6 realms will appear, where the weary travelers may stop. The dead will ultimately find new parents that are reborn. The Tibetan Buddhists, the meaning of life is to seek truth and practice compassion. This concludes my presentation on the Bardo Thodol, or the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This only skimmed the surface. There's so much more meaning behind all the details. I encourage every one of you to read it through. It's a short text. Whether or not you agree or think you could be interested in it, you will find something in it. You'll take something away. So thank you for watching, and I hope you